Hey guys, so I've shown you how to test a React application, but I haven't gone over how to test a GraphQL server. And since we just set up a nice big one with our Slack application, I thought it'd be a nice time to show you guys how to test this guy and how I would go about doing it. So to test this, I'm going to be using Jest. This is basically just the test runner we're going to use because I like it, but you'd be fine to use a different one if you prefer a different test runner. It's not as important. And then we're going to be using Babel Jest. That way we can use async and await in the test because I prefer using that versus .then. And then we're going to be doing some requests to our server, so we're going to be using Axios for that. But again, each one of these parts is kind of interchangeable. If you have different preferences, it's very easy to do this. So right now I have my server up and running here. You can see it, and we're just going to run some tests on it. Now some people, what they do is they'll test the types of the GraphQL server and lots of different stuff. But what I prefer to do is to actually just test the resolvers that we made and that we get the responses that we're expecting, and kind of do it that way. So what we're going to be doing is usually how Jest recommends is to put the tests like right in here. So creating like a channel.test.js or channel.spec.js. But the way we're doing this right now, if we look at our index, we are actually just like loading all the files in here. And so I'm afraid we'll actually load tests instead of just resolvers. So what I'm going to do is just create an outside folder here that's going to house our tests. So in here, I'm going to create a new folder called user.spec.js. And so here I'm going to put in the tests for our user resolver and then go from there. So the setup for this is we're going to install a few things. I'm going to do yarn add dev, and I'm going to do Axios, Babel Jest, and Jest. So I'm currently in the folder Slack clone server. This is where my server is located, and we'll install those dependencies. And then in our package JSON, we're going to add a new script here, and we're just going to say test. And what test is going to do is it's going to run Jest. And now the cool thing about Jest is that's all we need to do. Oops. Close this. I accidentally just overridden this, so give that a save. Here, I'm going to close this file. There we go. So create a test script, and this is just going to call Jest. And Jest automatically knows where your tests are, so you don't have to tell it. You just tell it to run Jest, and it'll run your tests. So now in here, we're going to import Axios from Axios. So what I like to do is actually just make requests to our resolvers and to our server. So I have my server up and running, like I said, and we're just going to say describe. And how tests work is, at least with Jest, is you'll use this describe keyword, and this describes basically a group of tests. So testing maybe user resolvers, and then inside of this you'll use the test keyword to test individual ones. And you notice the second parameter is a function where you actually put your stuff. So describe and test are actually global keywords that we're getting from Jest, and they're automatically in there. Jest has them globally. When we run test Jest, they'll be there. So for tests here, I'm going to say we'll grab all users here, and we're just going to put this here. Now it's kind of annoying that this is red all the time. So what I can do is just go to my .eslint and say rules, or actually not rules, globals is I believe what it is, and I can list any global variables my application has. So we have describe and test, and give that a save, and we need to put a comma there, and hopefully now we shouldn't see, and we don't see those errors anymore. So to test this, I'm just going to say const response is equal to Axios dot, and we're going to await, so I'm going to make this an async function, Axios dot post, and we're just literally going to make a post request to our server. So I'm on 8081 localhost HTTP / and do / GraphQL, and then here you put in the body, and we're just going to put in a query here, Now the query we want to run is we're going to be testing the all users query. So if I pop over here to GraphQL, I can see this is all users. I can run it. Now I can grab more things if I want, like the username, email, whatever I want to test out, right? I can run that and we get all this data back. So I can copy this query, place it here, and now we'll actually, this response will get run, and in the response object there's going to be a data back, and data is going to hold the response from the server. So what we can do now is use the expect keyword, and I'm going to add this to a global. This is another keyword coming from jest. So we can say expect our data object, and if we come over here we can see all the different things we can use for expect with jest. So this is basically the test, and we're basically want to test are we getting the object that we expect to get. So we can say, I believe there's an object one. Let's search object. To match object is the one we want to run, and basically we're saying we're getting back the object we expect to get. And what object are we expecting to get back? Well, we just ran this query, we expect to get this. So we can copy that, paste it in here, give that a save. So we expect when we make this query to this endpoint that we get this data back. Now to run this, I'm just going to say npm run test, and it's going to go ahead and run up test or jest. Look, it found our test user.spec and it passed. And just to show you this is working how we expect, if I put a 4 here, we should get a test did not pass. And see, we get an error here saying we did not pass the test anymore, and it's saying, hey, the ID is 4 when we expected an ID of a 1. And we can put that back. So okay, this is well and good. We can test all our endpoints this way. And make sure they all fit, but a lot of times we're currently messing with the production database. So, well, this is considered our production database anyway, our main database. And so what if I want to create objects, like create users to test and whatnot? I don't want to affect the database that I'm using here. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll create separate databases that they use for testing, and we're going to follow that practice as well. So in my package.json, I'm going to, instead of creating this starting just regularly, we're going to start this for testing. And to start this for testing, we're just going to basically pass in, if we go to the index of our models, so here is where we say what our database is. So for testing, I want to create a new database called test slack, but I want to come in here and change it every time. So we're going to say process.env.testdb or. So basically I'm saying if we pass in this variable called testdb, use that as the name, otherwise use the Slack database. So now in my package.json, I'm going to create a new one called test server or something, or I don't know what even to call it. We'll call it tstart for basically. Now we'll do test-server, and for this we're just going to say testdb is equal to test slack. So we need to make a server called test slack, and if you've seen this before, what this is doing is this is just making an environment variable for this command. So when this command is run, it's going to be grabbing this variable right here called testdb, and it's going to set equal to slack just for this. But notice how this variable is not getting run here. So when we run start, we're going to use our Slack database. When we run test server, we're going to run this database. But right now that database doesn't exist, so we can create that database by running create db. So with create db, I'm just going to create test slack, and it should create it. Now this create db comes with pSQL, I believe, so if you have pSQL you should have that, and we can connect to test slack and see what it looks like, and you can do \d. There's nothing in there right now, but you could have came in here and said create database test slack too. That's the same thing as using create db. This is just a command line shortcut. Alright, so now I want to run this test server. So I'm going to come over here, and this is where I'm running my application, and I'm just going to say npm run test server instead of running the regular one. Alright, so it's up and running, and now when this runs, it should go ahead and populate our test Slack with all the tables. So if we describe this now, cool, we see all the tables that we would expect now. So now when we're connecting this and running the tests, we should get no users back. So we can change our tests over here, user.spec. We expect no users now. So that's what we expect to get back. And we can run our npm run jest, npm run test, and now run jest, and we can see we get nothing back. Cool. So now we can continue to do this, and we can do this for creating users and so on. So now I could say test create user, and then we're just going to create our user in here. So we can copy what we're doing here, paste that in, and make this an async function as before. And now we're going to do a mutation here. So mutation, and we're going to create, or we call it register. So why don't we call it just, instead of create user, we'll call it register. Register. And we're going to pass in username as test user, email test user at testuser.com, and password tester. And okay, we need to select some fields. Are we doing okay? Yeah, errors, and we'll get the path back, path and message. And from our user, let's get an ID. We actually don't care about the ID. Let's just get email, because the ID is like whatever. Cool. So let's copy this. We'll run that mutation. And we'll copy. This is what we expect the response to be, right? So we can come down here, and that should be a, there we go, semicolon. And I can say const data is equal to response, and then I'm going to say expect data to match object, and we can paste our object in here, give that a save. So now right now this is not going to work, at least I don't think it's going to work. Let's see, npm run test, because we just created that user, and now we're going to try to create it again, right? And cool, we see this error. Let's see what we get. So username is not unique, so we get an error back. We're expecting no error. The reason for that is we just created this user here, and now, oops, I'm trying to create him again. So our database already has a user in it, so it's starting with state basically. And every time when we start a test, we'd like the database to be either clean, or maybe it starts with some seed data. So I'll show you how I like to do that. So I like to create like a little shell script. So we'll come over here, and in my server we're going to say reset db.sh, and all this does, and let's say reset test db, is it's going to reset the database. So we're going to do hash $, /bin/bash, I believe is where it's at. We'll see if that actually works. I always forget it. And we're going to say drop db. So this is a special command like create db. So drop db test Slack, and then we're going to create db test Slack. So we're just going to recreate that. And over here I'm going to change mod this +x so it's executable. So what I name this, reset test. And so if I run reset test db, we already have a connection running, so I'm gonna have to come over here, shut down the server, reset the database, What else has a connection to it? This doesn't. Drop DB, error, test Slack already exists. Oh, drop DB. Drop DB. No, drop DB works. Test Slack. There we go. Drop DB command not found. Oh, I just misspelled it. I was like, it worked right here. Why is it not working? Oops, let's clear. So make sure to spell it right. And now let's run this again. So drop DB. Oops. Our reset. So we dropped it, then created it. So now we can come back over here. Do npm run test server. And now I'm going to do npm run test. And now hopefully the test passes. And we notice our register pass works okay. So now here I would want to reset the database again. So now I can run the test again. Oh, it didn't work. I'm guessing it's because I'm connected still. So a nice little we should automate this so we run reset before. So in my package.json here, I'm going to run /reset test db.sh and then just a semicolon. So we're going to run this command and then we're going to run this. So we're going to reset the database, then start up the server, and we shouldn't really be making changes when we're working with the test database per se. So you could get rid of node daemon if you wanted and just use Babel node, but if you want to keep node daemon, that's okay too. So we're going to reset the database and restart it. So let's give that a try. Also, some Linux you have to do the ampersand like that to run 2 commands in a row. So npm run test server. Cool. And now we can run our test here. And our test works. So every time we wanted to restart this, we come over here, restart the server, rerun our tests. You could probably morph this into one command where it starts the server, then runs jest. So you could like run this in another process or something, but we're just going to keep it like this for now because I think this makes sense. Alright, so let's do one more test. So we can pretty much go infinite with the number of tests we have. We have a lot of resolvers over here. But one thing I think that would be helpful is to show a multi-step one. So for example, actually let's just, this register one, let's work off of that. So we just registered a user. Now I want to log in with the user and make an authenticated request. That's like something I'd like to test. So first we're going to expect that. That's well and good. Then over here I'm going to make another request to log in. So give that a save. And let's write out that mutation. So log in. Email, what email did we use? Test user. Give that a copy. And make sure quotes and then a password. Tester. And then we can grab the refresh token and other token. So here we're not going to expect anything because we're going to get a new token every time. We could expect these fields if we wanted to, but I'm just going to grab the token and refresh token from this query and we're going to use it for the next thing. Alright, so do that. We'll say response to and say const. We can't actually get the data for this one either. So here we're just going to get const and we're going to say data login token refresh token. This is going to be equal to response to.data. And then here we can now use these tokens in another request. So let's create another request down here. So request number 3. So now maybe we want to to make a team, which requires to log in. So that might be our whole purpose of doing this test, like create team is what we'd like to test. I know we're in the user spec, so you probably don't want to put this here, but this is just an example of how you would do it. So with our create team, let's go ahead and just make that in graphical. So, oops, create team, name, team1, and then OK, and then our team, and then our name. So we could copy that mutation, put that here. So we'd like to create team1 and see if that works. Now we need to authenticate for this, so we need to add headers. How you do that in Axios is just to stick them here. So I'm going to say x token is equal to token, and then x refresh token is equal to refresh token. Okay, so we're making a third response to GraphQL, creating a team, passing in the tokens that we got from over here. And so with our response back, we could expect what we expect to get back from this guy. So expect response 3.data.toBe object to match object. There we go. So here we expect there to be a data field, and then here be create team, and then in our create team we expect it to be an OK of true, and then there to be a team, and inside team to have a name, and the name's going to be team1, which we put right here. Alright, so let's see if all that worked. I have no idea if it will. Let's restart our server, and we can just fix any errors we get with this. Okay, so now run our test, and you could grab more fields from this if you wanted to and whatnot. So let's see. Alright, so this is what we expected. What we actually received is an error, not authenticated. So it looks like our tokens did not get passed in. Okay, so here's how you add headers in Axios. I just need to add this little headers object above here. So now we're all good, and let's give this a run. So now when I run npm run test, we're still getting an error, but it no longer has to do with headers, but this weird network error. And I actually don't know what is going on here. I haven't really seen this before. I did some Googling about it, and the fix was to install this XML HTTP request and run this. I have no idea what this does or what this means. If you know why this is happening, I'd love to know in the comments. But I just went ahead and installed that with yarn add dev XML HTTP request. Putting that guy at the top here, it now works. So we can rerun, get rid of it, npm run test server, and then give this a run, and we'll go ahead and fetch this, pass our headers OK, create the team, and our object will match. So run our test. And cool, all of a sudden now everything works. So that's how I would be doing login. Now you could want to make like this bit here where we log in to like a function, because I'm sure there's lots of resolvers where you would want to log in. Now a few of you may be thinking, why the heck are we creating this reset test DB when in our index here we could just, right here, we could just do force true, right? And that's a great way actually to do that. And if you want to, you could just do process.env.testDB, and if you get a test DB, you want to force true, otherwise false. So what? Oh, there we go. We can just turn this into a Boolean expression. So if we get a test DB, we want to force restart the database, otherwise we don't. Basically force will just dump the database and restart it, and I think this is actually a really good way to do it if you want to, every time you test, wipe your database from scratch. Now a lot of you though are going to want to not dump it all the way from scratch, but maybe right now in our database we have a user, for example. So I'm going to stop the server real quick. So we have one user in our database right now. Let's say we wanted to keep the database there in its current state and use that every time. So when I reset the database, I don't want to reset to scratch. The way I like to do that is just take a dump of the database. So test slack, and I'm just going to dump and say dump.sql. So what the heck is this doing? Well, this is a command utility that comes with psql, I believe also. It's called Postgres dump, and it basically just takes your database, and dumps it into a file. So if we vim dump.sql, we actually see our whole database here. And I think if we do a search, we'd be able to see where we're inserting. See how we're inserting this test user? So now here I can add a separate one, psql, and then our database name, test slack, and then dump.sql. So what that will do is it actually will copy what's in dump SQL, run it in test slack. So now our test slack has a user in it. So for example, now in my test suite I can actually expect an error. So if I do npm run test server, there's actually still going to be one user in it, and you notice how we did this thing where we run all the users. So if I come over here, I can query it, all users, there's going to be one in there because we just created that user. Cool. So now if I were to do the run test, we'll get an error as expected. So that's how I would save the database and then load the database back in if you wanted to. So we get an error as expected because we need the username to be unique. So if you wanted to basically see the database, this is how I would do it. I'm sure there's a way you could do it with SQLize too, but I don't really care for SQLize that much, and this is so simple, I love it. Otherwise, if you just want to drop the database every time, I recommend using force right here. That'll work nicely for you. So this is how I would test the database. Let me know if you have, test the resolvers in GraphQL server, all of that. That's how I would test it. Let me know if you have any other questions about testing. In general, I don't like testing too much, and I won't spend too much time with it. But that's how I'd go about doing the resolvers. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, the code will be up on GitHub.